Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today we got the Zana mods that are going to be hitting in the Delirium expansion next week. And there's a couple of doozies there, and there's also a couple of very significant ones that are not there. So I want to go through these, give a quick heads up on what they do, why you might consider using them, and also give my verdicts on which ones I think will be the best to use. If you're not that familiar with Zana mods, we need a quick refresher. These are options that you can use when you stick a map into the map device, and they will modify the map that you're putting in there in some specific way, often adding more monsters to it, and also causing the map to therefore drop more loot, potentially. They're at their best when they're used in conjunction with sextant modifiers or maps that are carefully selected to have mods on them that synergize with the Zana mod themselves. All of them cost pure Chaos Orbs, so they're denominated in raw Chaos Orbs, and this actually is one of the main uses of Chaos Orbs in the game at the moment. So, first up, if you don't buy any of the other mods, you'll start with 1% increased quantity of items found in the area, and this will scale up to 8% as you complete more of the Atlas. So this is automatic. This is essentially the mod you get when you don't buy a mod. Very powerful little effect that doesn't seem to do very much, but over 100 maps, it is a considerable effect. Now this will scale up from 1 to 8% as you complete more of the Atlas, and so in that sense it's a bit of a reward for doing that. Additionally, you will unlock each of these mods by completing certain thresholds. We don't actually know what these thresholds are, but if they're anything like they were in the last league, Blight is likely to come from completing about 140 maps on the Atlas, Beyond about 130, Parandus about 110, Domination about 90. I don't know the exact numbers, but there'll be something that you'll get one every now and again while you're in the phase of exploring the Atlas. And by the time you're settled into your endgame farming Atlas, likely you will have all of these established. So, so that's the Atlas mod you get when you don't buy an Atlas mod. After that we have Fortune Favors the Brave. Now, I'm going to say I don't recommend ever using this. Fortune Favors the Brave picks one of the mods at random, including the ones you haven't unlocked, and adds it onto your map. So potentially, this seems like it's really great if you get Blight. You know, suddenly you're paying 3 Chaos and you're getting a mod that's priced 8 Chaos. The thing is that it's more reliable just to buy Blight, and if you have a map that is particularly synergistic with some of the other mods on here, then you'd be better off just simply buying the mods that synergize with it. A lot of these mods will make a map better, but not by enough to merit their cost, unless you have a degree of synergy between the map that you're putting in the device, any scarabs you're using, any sextant mods you're using, and the Zana mod that you're selecting. So for that reason, I'm going to advise you to never use Fortune Favors the Brave, except if there's a challenge to use it, which is a pretty common thing. A lot of previous leagues have had a challenge to use this 30 times or something along those lines. In that case, get it out of the way, and then never use it again. Next up we have Ambush. Now, what Ambush does, it brings back the history of the Ambush League from Path of Exile's early history. So that will mean that there will be several strongboxes added to the map. Sometimes in the past, the Ambush mod has added 2 strongboxes. Sometimes it's added 4. We're just going to have to see how many it actually adds. Now, strongboxes are an interesting thing. Obviously, a Diviner's strongbox is very valuable whenever you get it, but they seem to be pretty rare. It's my estimate, I could be wrong here, Diviner's strongboxes make up about 1/2% of all the strongboxes you'll find. So for that reason, it's not worth it to just put Ambush on every map hoping to get the Diviner's strongbox. Where it's really strong though, is in conjunction with some of the sextant modifiers that modify the effects of strongboxes. There's one in particular that gives 500% increased item quantity to all strongbox monsters in the map. This is really, really, really good. And it's one that if you get it, what you're going to want to do to get maximum value out of it is to use that sextant mod on a map that has good divination cards. I like Tower, you might like Burial Chambers, something along those lines. So use that sextant modifier there, and then use the Ambush Zana mod in conjunction with an Ambush Scarab So these are dropped by Haku in the Betrayal system, and they add additional strongboxes which stack with the Ambush Zana mod, and then add a Divination Card Scarab as well. This combination of effects will cause you to get a massive multiplier to the number of strongboxes there. You also want to use one of the two strongbox related prophecies. Now there's no guarantee that these will proc, so you might end up going into your map and finding out that this hasn't happened. But there's the Bountiful Traps prophecy, which adds 6 strongboxes to a map, so it's like an ambush scarab on sextants, an ambush scarab on steroids. Or you could use Monstrous Treasure, which is the dream to get, and Monstrous Treasure adds 36 strongboxes but removes all of the monsters on the map. So if you can get any of those combinations to happen, what you want to do is then go in and roll your strongboxes, not the way you normally would, not to maximize loot, but you want to instead roll them to maximize the number of additional monsters that spawn out of each strongbox. And then when you do this, boom, 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 you'll be able to kill lots of monsters and get a stupendous amount of loot. So this is the main use of the ambush Zana mod. It is cheap enough that you can just apply it randomly on maps and not get terrible returns. You might even get good returns over time, but I think that you really do want to mostly be using this when you've got appropriate sextants to use it with. Next up we have Abyss. Abyss will add an Abyss to a map, and this Abyss can then either contain an Abyssal Trove, or it can contain an access to an Abyssal Depths, which will drop a Stygian Vice and maybe drop one of the various Abyss uniques, things like the Tomb Fist gloves, which are really strong. Now, if you get one of these Abyss, if you're going to use one of these Abyss Zana mods, the best situation to use it is on maps that are very high tier, very early in the league. There is a lot of demand early league for the for the Abyssal Jewels. You'll want to be using Abyss on your tier 15 and 16 maps very early in the league, because you'll have a good chance of getting both in a tier 15 map. You'll be able to pick up your Abyssal Jewels. In a tier 16, not only will you get the Abyssal Jewels, but sometimes you'll get the item level 86 Stygian Vice belts. Now, late in the league, at least in a trade league, an item level 86 Stygian Vice is not worth very much, but early on, they are really worth something. So this can be a potent little moneymaker if you're the sort of person that gets to tier 16 maps on day 2 or 3 of a league. Later in a league, it's my experience that all of the products of the Abyss content will just be oversupplied throughout the league economy, and so in a trade league, I wouldn't generally use Abyss after that, except just to add more monsters onto a map. It does do that. It adds more monsters onto a map, and that just means that you're going to leave the map with more regular loot, more XP, and so that's a perfectly fine use as well. Bloodlines is next. Bloodlines was really powerful once. What Bloodlines does is it applies a Bloodline mod to every magic monster in the zone. It makes certain Bloodlines League exclusive uniques available, none of which are particularly good, and it also adds several packs of magic monsters. Now, packs of magic monsters give a lot of XP and give a lot of loot, so there is some incentive to use this. However, there was a point at which this mod was really good, and that point was back in the map scarcity days, when you would often, if you were running high tier maps, so say you were running 13, 14, 15, 16, you would often run out of those tiers of maps. This is no longer a factor, and so the reason that you would spend Chaos on Bloodlines back then was because it would increase the amount of tier 14, 15, 16 maps that dropped. Using Bloodlines still does this, but tier 14, 15, and 16 maps have been devalued so much since then. Like they used to be, tier 16s used to be 35 Chaos in an established trade league, that this is no longer really worthwhile. When you will want to consider using Bloodlines as a Zana mod, this is mostly in solo self-found. If you're playing in a context where you can't just buy the next map tier up, and you're trying to break out of the harder tiers for maps to sustain. So this is tier 7, 8, and 9. You've got a few maps of those tiers, but you've just gotten virtually nothing beyond that. Bloodlines will help you break up into the higher tiers. This is the hardest part for acquiring maps because you don't have the insane amounts of drops that you will get later in the league. So that's the main use case of Bloodlines. Additionally, if you're on the cutting edge of progression very early in the league, so let's say that it's you're in tier 9 maps, but there's just not many people yet in tier 9 maps in a trade league, so this might be, say, 7 hours after league start. If you're already in tier 9 maps at this point, yes, you are going to want to be throwing Bloodlines on every map that you can, assuming that you're able to beat them, because every map that drops for you is going to be a major piece of loot. It's not going to just be a means to an end to keep mapping, it will be something that you can sell for a lot of currency. So maximizing your map returns matters there, but once you're established in the league, it doesn't. Next up we have Domination. Domination's interesting. It has a history. Domination will bring back the days of the Domination League, which was the one that introduced shrines. So, going the Domination Zana mod will, again, add a few time-worn uniques to the pool, none of which are particularly notable, and it will add several shrines, which will have a lot of monster packs around them. This mod used to be really expensive in the past. From memory, I think it used to be 12 Chaos in some leagues, because it added so many maps onto monsters onto the map. It still does what it used to do. It's just that there are so many other ways to add monsters now that it's sort of been devalued a bit. I don't really recommend ever using this unless there is a challenge related to shrines. It just simply doesn't add enough to merit its cost. It does add a convenient cluster of monsters, and usually this will be a positive thing for you. Well, I mean, they're clustered together, which is always really good. But sometimes it will add very dangerous shrines. Most importantly is the Divine Shrine. Divine Shrine grants absolute immunity to damage to everyone that is affected by it. This renders you pretty much completely immune to being killed in that map, at least for the next 45 seconds. However, where the Divine Shrine is really dangerous is that it will cause tremendous lag. If you fire an attack into a pack of monsters that are under a Divine Shrine, not only will all of them survive and be aggroed on you, but you will often see a massive lag spike afterwards. For that reason, in Hardcore, I would suggest probably never using the Domination mod these days. You won't often get a Divine Shrine, but they will happen. And in Softcore, I think it's just not really worth it. There are too many other better ways to add monsters to a map. Next up we have Parandus. So Parandus will add 3, or at least historically it's been 3 from the Zana mod, I don't know that it still is. It will add 3 packs of monsters that surround special chests. Each of these monsters, once it's killed, will be raised at least once, and then once you've killed them all twice, the treasure chest will become open. These have some pretty powerful monsters guarding them, so do be warned of that. Additionally, the Parandus mod those chests will drop a bunch of loot, but they'll also drop a bunch of Parandus coins. And sometimes this mod will spawn Kadiro Parandus in the zone, an NPC who will offer you a trade deal. This trade deal will involve selling unique items often, and often selling currency. His prices mix a bit, sort of get mixed up a bit, but generally speaking, he will sell tier 1 rarity uniques. He'll be able to sell pretty much all of them, and he will sell them at prices that are several thousand Parandus coins. So for instance, he might sell a Kalm's Heart for 7,000 Parandus coins. This isn't always a good deal. You'll need to do the maths and check whether it's worth it or not. If you're in solo self-found, I generally would avoid the Parandus mod. I don't think that you're likely to have access to enough Parandus coins to make this worthwhile. On the flip side, if you're in a trade league, then the Parandus mod has a lot of potential. If you find a Kadiro Parandus that has an outstanding offer on it, then you should just basically buy as many Parandus coins as you can in order to get that offer to happen. Kadiro Parandus does seem to be a not insignificant source of headhunters, and potentially also Mirrors of Kalandra, although they seem to be rarer through him than headhunters are. For this reason, I would suggest if you are very rich in a league, And when I say very rich, I don't actually mean very, very rich. I mean, like, if you've got, say, 30 exalts to your name, I would suggest, if you're in a trade league, trading to own about 20,000 Parandus coins, so that if a Kadiro Headhunter comes up, you're in a position to say, okay, I will buy that. It's usually about 15 to 18,000 Parandus coins. The danger is, and this is a really important thing to keep in mind, if you find Kadiro late in a league, and you don't have enough Parandus coins, and he's offering one of his best deals, he's either selling a Mirror of Kalandra, or he's selling a Headhunter, it becomes a bit of a risk to go and buy Parandus coins from other players, partly because there will be unethical people who will join your party, jump into your hideout, and then run straight into your map with 25,000 Parandus coins or whatever, in order to try and steal that deal from under your nose. So what you should do if you're buying Parandus coins for an offer that is already in your hideout, you want to go into your options, and you want to disable the ability for party members to visit your hideout. You can turn this back on again straight afterwards, but remove the ability for people in your party to come into your hideout at all. Then go and buy the Parandus coins off another player, and then go and use them to get the Parandus offer. You'll often find that people will post fake prices on Parandus coins as well. So, there'll be someone that will have 50,000 Parandus coins for trade, and let's say that everyone else is selling them at 70 coins per Chaos Orb. This person might say that they're selling them at 80 coins per Chaos Orb, but only for large quantities. And you're thinking, oh, this is fantastic. Actually, be warned, that's what the scammers tend to look like. So, Parandus scams out of the way, let's move on to Beyond. Beyond is an interesting mechanic to have here. It's one that, for veteran players, is extremely powerful, and for less experienced players is a total and utter waste of currency. So Beyond is going to cost you 5 Chaos Orbs each time you apply it. And what it does is it adds the Beyond mechanic onto a zone. Firstly, this causes, again, time-worn uniques from the Beyond League to be available. That's a little bit of a bonus, but not very important. The big thing is that every time you kill a monster, there is a 13% chance for that monster to drop a little red ball on the ground. You can't interact with these, they're just a visual indicator that the monster was once there. This 13% is able to stack with other sources of Beyond, so if the map itself inherently has 13% chance for monsters to drop a Beyond portal, then that's 26%. If you've got the Sextant that adds 6%, that's 32% between them all. This will also be scaled up by the Awakening level. And so if you've got 32% and then it's scaled up by Awakening level 8, then suddenly you've got a 39% chance for any monster that you kill to drop a pile of Beyond Poo. When 4 of these piles of Beyond Poo are spawned in close proximity, they will be consumed, and a Beyond pack will be created. This will have 3 magic and 1 rare monster. These will have higher stats than are normal for magic and rare monsters in the area, but not overwhelmingly so, and they'll be pretty easy to kill. Then, if you can spawn 4 of those together, then you will get a Beyond boss. These Beyond bosses are unique monsters that have a considerable amount of hit points. They have some dangerous moves, and one of them, Abaxith, at the end of all it is genuinely very dangerous. However, the reason you would do this, so you're adding a lot of monsters on, it's twofold. Firstly, you get a lot of XP from all these extra monsters. Magic monsters, rare monsters, and unique monsters are really quite good for XP, especially if you can kill them quickly. And if you're going to be running Beyond, you're going to be killing them quickly. Secondly, the rare monsters will provide Headhunter Buffs. If you're able to source a Headhunter, then this is going to cause you to absolutely go nuts with the amount of monsters that you can kill. If you can't get your hands on a Headhunter, the Inspired Learning Jewel is likely to be cheaper than usual this league, although that's not quite as ridiculous with Beyond as some of the other things are. Lastly, this is just an extraordinary chaotic and packed map. They're a lot of fun to run. Maps with all of the Beyond stacked together. I have seen footage of a player who, this was with extraordinary amounts of setup, there was a player who managed to go from level 1 to 100 in 3 hours and 15 minutes. Now, this was being carried by a whole group, so that group, for instance, ran them through the storyline. But once they got to maps, all of their mapping was done in Beyond maps, and using, taking advantage of this triple Beyond shenanigans, and just going generally completely and utterly nuts in them. Last up, we have Blight, in terms of the things that are here. So, Blight hasn't been a Zana mod before. You'll notice it's expensive, 8 Chaos. That sounds like a lot, but it will be worth it. Reason for this is that Blights receive, well, firstly, they dropped a lot of loot, even in the Blight League. You're finding that roughly 1 in every 15 maps that you did, you'd run the Blight, and you'd get a Blighted map, and they were selling for 60 Chaos at the time. You would get heaps of Chaos Orbs and similar level currency. You'd frequently get the top tier essences, which would then, of course, sell, at least in that league, they were selling for 15 Chaos or so. And you just get lots of incidental small stuff. Early in the league, you're getting veiled items, and veiled items would sell, at least for the first sort of 3 or 4 days of the league, until the most serious crafters had their crafts all organised. So, what's happened since then is that there's been some changes to the rarity of silver and gold oils. They've been made considerably more common. This doesn't actually make Blight more lucrative. It means that if you're playing in solo self-found, then running Blight from the map device will help you out here. It'll help you get your silver and gold oils that you might want for a particular anointment. If you're in a trade league, it's probably actually detrimental to you that the silver and gold oils are more common than they used to be, because they just won't have that huge markup that huge amount of value when you get them. However, the Blighted maps are a totally different thing. They are much more common than they were in the Blight League, and this is really significant because Blighted maps sell for a lot, and they're going to continue to sell for a lot. Blighted maps are really lucrative to run, and they drop such a variety of loot that it's really hard for Blighted maps to run out, for them to cease being really valuable. This is because when you're running a Blighted map, they can drop things like essences, they can drop raw currency, they can drop quality gems, things that there's pretty insatiable demand for. So what I'm expecting will happen is there will be people who are running tier 16 maps back to back and augmenting them with Blight. These people will be net creators of Blighted maps, and they'll create a lot of them. Then there'll be another section of the player base in trade leagues that will be buying those Blighted maps and going and running them, and then just selling all of the various loot that drops from them. So Blight is going to be a significant addition to the roster of Zana mods, and I think it's going to be one that will be really impactful. The last thing, though, that needs to be said is there's something missing. This list does not have Nemesis on it. Now, this is going to be significant. The Delirium League mechanics look to be very Headhunter friendly. Now, I've mentioned a few times that when you're running one of these Zana mods, that time-worn uniques that are linked to that league from Path of Exile's history will also be available in that map. And that's been a major source in the past of the Headhunter unique belt, has been through various shenanigans with Nemesis maps. So you'd have a Nemesis modded map, you'd bring in just a regular unique belt, and you'd spam it with ancient orbs. And then eventually those ancient orbs might create you a Headhunter. Or you could come in with a shaped belt and hit it with hundreds and thousands of chance orbs and scouring orbs in between, and hope that you can get your hands on a hope that you will eventually get your hands on a shaped Headhunter. Now, with the Nemesis mod not available, this means that all of these methods for acquiring Headhunter are essentially removed from the game for this league. The ways that you can still get a Headhunter are from any source of time-worn uniques. So this is things like the time lost incubator, which provides, it says that it provides a valuable unique item. What it does is it provides a unique item that can't drop under normal circumstances. There are the hidden heirloom nodes in the Delve Mines, but then most significantly, there will be killing the map bosses of once you're at a high awakening level. This will often drop a unique, and these uniques are sometimes time-worn uniques. There's a number of other sources as well, but I think that the vast majority of Headhunters in this league are going to come from Divination cards. There are 3 Divination cards that directly give a Headhunter. There is the Doctor Divination card, which is the most common one. Set of 8 trades in for a normal Headhunter. There is the Fiend, which is a set of 11 that trades in for a Headhunter with a single Vial implicit. And there is the Demon, which trades in as a set of 10 for a 2 implicit corrupted Headhunter. So these three are all still available. Additionally, there is the Nurse. A set of 8 of them gives a copy of the Doctor. So these are your Divination cards that directly and deterministically provide a Headhunter. There's also a number of random ones that can give one. These include the Wretched, which turns in for a unique belt and will almost never give a Headhunter, but will sometimes do so. There are things like the Valkyrie that turns in for a Nemesis item, and there's another one like that that's a corrupted Nemesis item from memory. These will provide another chance to get a Headhunter, but it is in general a pretty slim chance to get them this way. So my predictions here: if you're playing in a trade league, this is going to mean that Headhunter is going to be as expensive as it was in Legion. The reason I think it will be at that point is because in the Legion League, Headhunter was ridiculously powerful with its synergies with the League mechanic. And what we've seen of Delirium so far implies that actually it will be the same. That Headhunter will have a lot of synergy with the Delirium mechanic because it will be, at least when you find Delirium Marrow in maps, it will be a sort of clear speed race through the map. You're going to want to get to the boss while you've still got your Delirium effect active. And so for that reason, I think the Delirium content is going to synergize very well with Headhunter, and Headhunter is going to be a bit rarer. The next thing to say is it will be absolutely impossible to get Headhunters that have influence types on them. So you won't be able to get a Shaped Headhunter unless there's something new that hasn't been revealed in the Divination cards. And that's important because it means that Eternity Shroud builds will no longer have access to that very powerful setup. However, Shaped Headhunters were extremely expensive and really just not available to players unless you were at the very rich end of the player base. Anyways, I think that gives a bit of a sum up of what's present and what's absent that's really important. There's obviously a couple other things that are absent that will affect some players. So for instance, the absence of Essence will be something that will be felt by solo self-found players very early in the league. Although I don't think it's all that significant, that they'll be gone. It's gone, so it's not available to them as a gearing technique early in the game. But I do think that Blights will more than make up for the supply of essences once a league is established. If you've got any comments or questions, though, definitely fire away. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you have a good one.